The blessings of coming home, the joy of coming home. Congregations at various times and different organizations have homecoming day. They call up all the old people that used to come, or the people who used to work at a certain place, and they invite them to come in for some kind of a celebration. And that's the first time that a lot of them have seen each other in a long, long time. And so the idea of homecoming, the idea of just being able to come home or having a home to come to, is really a very important thing in our lives. We all come from some kind of home. We are all born into homes. What does that mean to us? Well, I want to think in terms of the church, of course, as well as the nuclear family and all. But home is supposed to be a place of happiness and security. It's a place where children are reared. It's a place where we learn respect for other people. It's a place where we learn something about finances. It's a place that we learn something about morality, what is right and what is wrong. So home is a very important idea. Now let's transfer that for just a moment over to the church. Is the church a place where we learn respect for one another? Or is it kind of a place where on the way home from church, the children are in the car and all that, and people begin taking apart the sermon, or taking apart the prayer, or taking apart somebody that was there that displeased them a little bit. And the first thing you know, children begin learning, well, my mom and dad teach me to respect people, but then when it really comes down to it, they don't respect people. And so there needs to be an atmosphere that is created in a congregation that says, this is my home. I'm with my brothers and sisters. Now, I have 4 children. I have 12 grandchildren. I'd just like to throw that out. But I have 12 grandchildren. Let me tell you something. I see them just about every chance I get. Why? They're part of me. I've told them when they get the whole bunch together, I would sit back and very proudly say, if it wasn't for me, there wouldn't be a single one of you here. But the whole idea is that we belong to each other. I belong to you, you belong to me. We are a part of the same family. No, we're not flesh and blood, but we're all adopted by God into the same family, or we all came into the same family through the new birth. So a question comes up, how am I making this congregation a real home? Now, somebody might say, boy, you should preach this Sunday morning because everybody would be here. Well, most everybody would be here. Well, the reason is because the people that can really make a difference are probably you rather than them. And I don't mean that in a disparaging way at all, but I am saying that you have a feeling by coming together at times other than just the Sunday morning service, you have a feeling of camaraderie, a feeling of home, a feeling of family, probably more so than the ordinary person in the congregation. And I'm not talking about just this congregation, but any congregation of people. It's just pretty much that way. And so we need to think in terms of, how am I teaching, how am I exemplifying the idea of God's family in this congregation? Well, we need to learn to be together. We need to learn to live together. It was a great time, during the time we were raising our children and all that, and we saw them every day, and we loved them, and the first thing you know, they grow up, and one goes to college, and then another, and 4 of them go to college, and I don't see them nearly as much. I call them on the phone and this sort of thing, and then before very long, they get married. And so I have 4 children, all of whom are married now. I don't see them as much as I used to. I wish that I could. But the idea, and they don't see each other as much as they used to, but they enjoy one another. I got an email today. I picked it up on my computer, and I have to share. It was not a part of this sermon, but I have to share this email with you because I think it says something about family. And very frankly, I was very proud of this. One of my sons, as you very well know, Richard, was diagnosed with cancer, and then he had this PET scan, and they said there is no more sign of cancer in your body. What wonderful, wonderful news, great news. And so they're going to finish the chemotherapy and all this sort of thing. But one of my grandsons wrote a letter to his mom. And he said, wouldn't it be good if the whole family went together, because his birthday is coming up in 24th of April. Wouldn't it be fine if the whole family would contribute to a fund and send them off on a big vacation, the two of them? Now I thought, coming from a grandchild, that really set me off. But what does it do? It says something about the cogency of home. We need to develop that within the congregation. We need to see more of each other. We need to do more things together. We need to be more like a home, more like a family, so that people are anxious to see one another. Well, in a family, in an extended family in particular, there are times that people don't get along very well together, My dad used to say, there were four of us children in my mom and dad's family, and my dad used to say, if I had my way, I would have a great big house, and all the children and all the grandchildren, we'd all just live here together. And I thought to myself, Dad, that's a good idea from your perspective. It's a lousy idea from our perspective. No, because we are different. We are different, and we need to make allowances for those differences. Yes, there are things now about my children that I can't correct. As a matter of fact, there are things that I never could correct about my children. But the idea is that because I love them, I overlook those things. Because I love them, those things do not present a division for me. Because I love them, and you're exactly the same way about your family. Because we love each other, we overlook a multitude of differences. Churches ought to be that way. We are a family. And so coming together is really coming home for us. And that's one of the great blessings. And although Paul was not talking about this particular thing in the book of Romans 14:1, he made a statement that I want to kind of apply to this. He said, let's receive one another. Now, he was talking about differences that people had. He wasn't talking about the church as the family of God. He was talking about differences that people have within the church. And he says, learn to receive each other. Don't argue about irrelevant things that don't really have to do with our salvation, things that are expedience and so forth. And so he says, receive one another. And then the statement in Colossians is a real fine statement. One of my many favorites that I have in the New Testament. After Paul has said, forbear one another and forgive each other if anybody has anything against one another. But then he says, and above all things, put on love, which binds it all together in perfect unity. You see, because we love one another, we're able to overlook a lot of the faults, a lot of the differences of one another. And that goes right along with what I just finished saying. Why is that true? Because we're family. We're God's family. And so we need really to understand that and to recognize that coming together ought to be for us like coming home. I get to see my brothers. I get to see my sisters. I get to see the people who believe like I do. People who want to walk the path that I walk. People that want to learn to love me in spite of the fact that I have some very eccentric ideas, but they still love me because in spite of that. And so, put on love, which holds it all together. In the 11th chapter of Hebrews, the apostle writes about a whole lot of people who have gone on before. That's the faith chapter of the Bible, you know. By faith, by faith, by faith. And it tells all about these great people of old who acted out of faith. You know, there's something interesting to me about this, and that is that when I learned to act out of faith, somehow or another, love also comes in there. And so the writer of Hebrews talked about by faith, Abraham did this. By faith, Moses did this. By faith, this one did this, and so forth. And he goes on down the line. And he talks about a whole lot of these people who acted out of faith. Now, what was his idea there? He says, basically, they blazed the trail for you. They showed you how to live. Live by faith. And then somehow or another, when we together learn that we are depending on Christ and His atonement for our salvation, the commonality of this draws us together so that we learn to love each other. And if, for example, I know that the other person, even though he differs with me about some things, the other person is depending on Jesus Christ for his salvation. Not on himself, not on his own goodness, but on the atonement of Jesus Christ. And when I know that, I see myself kin to him in some way, because this very important thing, the most important thing, we share. If you are married or you have been married, you would immediately say this, and you probably say it, well, that was the way my mother and father were too. The whole idea is that husbands and wives learn to overlook some of the differences and some of the faults of one another. Why? Because they love each other. We're together. We're a family. And that's just the way things are. There's a kind of an interesting thing about little kids. Little children grow up in a home, and they hear all kind of sounds and all kind of words and this sort of thing. There is a period of time in the development of a child where he goes through what is called vocal play. In vocal play, and Sebastian is going to do this. In vocal play, a child uses he utters every sound that the human voice can utter. Everything. He uses some of them because he hears his mom and dad use them. And so, you know, for example, I tried to say something when I was in Korea. I asked a Korean lady, what is the Korean word for this? And she told me, and I thought I pronounced it exactly right. No, that's not it. You see, I threw that one away. The sounds that the Korean people use in their speech is different from the sounds that you and I use in English speech. And when I was over in Vienna, Germans use a lot of guttural sound. I remember a student that I had, and I tried to pronounce his name. I thought I had it right, and he said no, and then he pronounced it, and I couldn't make that sound. Well, what happens is this. Because of the sounds that we hear and the sounds that mean things to us, when we're little bitty kids, we begin discarding the sounds that mean nothing to us. And we use the sounds that do mean something to us. And this is a phenomenon of voice and diction. And it's called vocal play. It's very, very important in the development of a child. He learns to speak that way. He learns to communicate that way. What does that have to do with what I'm saying? Well, I'm saying, what are other people learning from us? Are they learning obligations, duties, responsibilities? Or are they learning love and care and compassion? What are they learning from us? As a family of God, we need to project to other people as well as to ourselves within the family. We need to project this idea of we love each other. That's the fundamental of the whole business of family. People very seldom stay together because of financial things. Sometimes they do. People very seldom stay together because they enjoy the same kind of music. They very seldom stay together because they like certain people and certain foods and things like this. They stay together because they love each other. And churches are like that. Churches that divide primarily, not because of doctrinal issues, they divide because there's a lack of love. Now, what does this have to do with this thing? The title of the sermon was Coming Home, the blessings of coming home. Well, the blessings of coming home say, I have a place. I have a place where I can go. I know I'm loved. I know I'm cared for. I know that people there overlook my faults. They learn to live with me because we are the family of God. I'm reminded of Jacob and Esau. When I was preparing this sermon, I thought in terms of, wow, boy, they left on bad terms. You remember the story? Jacob had stolen the birthright, and Jacob had stolen the blessing that really belonged to Esau. And what did Esau say? He said, when my father dies, I'm going to kill my brother. That's what he said. Well, Jacob's mother heard this, and she said, Jacob, you better get out of here because your brother's going to kill you. And so he took off, and he went over and stayed for about 20 years in Syria, up near Haran in Syria. And then 20 years later, he comes home, and he's saying to himself, I don't know what my brother is going to do. Now I've got a big family. I've got a lot of animals and all this sort of thing. And he said, here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to divide them up, send one off that direction, another off in this direction, and I'm going to stay here and I'll meet my brother by myself. Well, Esau came to meet him. And it was a big surprise to Jacob because Esau embraced him, kissed him, was glad to see him. Nothing in there about, I'm going to kill you. So when we're separated, they say absence makes the heart grow fonder. Sometime when we're away from our families, we look back at the enjoyable times in that family. We look back at that, we say, boy, I wish I could relive that time. And the opportunity comes to go back and see that family and be a part of that family again. And it's just such a wonderful feeling. That's the way the church ought to be. The church needs to be the family of God so that when we're away and come back, we're welcomed, we're loved, and people, oh yeah, we had some differences, but now people are expressing their love for us and the fact that yes, you had faults and we had differences, but now we've overlooked those things. We love you. We're glad that you've returned to us. Well, the blessings of coming home. My wife's brother-in-law down in Florida had Lou Gehrig's disease, And at that time, he had survived the disease longer than any person in medical history of the disease. And but we just saw him. He just withered away, you know. And finally, he died. And his wife called and said, "JC has gone home." We knew what she was talking about. JC has gone home. A number of times, the question came up in his mind, why am I still here? I'm withering away. I can't walk anymore. I cannot be any help to the family or anything like that. I'm a liability. But he wasn't a liability. Why? Because he was loved. Because he was part of that family. They mourned when he left. They mourned when he had to depart this life. Why? Because they loved him. How many people in the congregation who might leave would we say, we need you back. We want to see you. We want to be part of your life. We want you to be part of our lives because we are family. One of the blessings of coming home is that very thing. The heavenly home, as a matter of fact, we talked in the Bible class this morning about 2 Corinthians chapter 5, where Paul says to the Corinthians, we know that we have a heavenly house, a house not made with hands, that's eternal. And he had contrasted this with the idea of the temporary. He just said, in the latter part of the 4th chapter, he said, we don't look at the things that are seen, but the things that are unseen, because the things we see are temporal. They're bounded by time. They will finally wear out. And he says, so we don't look at the things that are seen, but the things that are unseen, because the things that are seen are temporal, but the things that are unseen are eternal. Now, I don't know what heaven is like. I wish that I did, but I don't know what heaven is like except from the descriptions, and the descriptions are all physical, because that's all I understand. I was telling somebody this morning, I don't know how big a spirit is. I know that flesh and blood will not inherit the kingdom. The Bible says that in 1 Corinthians 15. But my spirit will join God. I don't know what a spirit looks like. I don't know how much it weighs. I don't know how much space it takes up, if any. I just don't know anything at all about a spirit. So when God describes heaven to us, he has to describe it in physical terms, like a street of gold, and gates of pearl, and walls of jasper, and all of the beauties of Revelation chapters 21, 22. And that's the way he describes it to me. What is it really like? I don't really know, because I don't know what eternity is like, and I don't know what spiritual existence is like. But what he's done is to talk to me about heaven as our eternal abode, our home. Not a house made with hands, you see, but it's a house made by God that's eternal in the heaven. And so the whole idea of death is not something that's morbid. It's not something that's horrible. Not something to be feared. Paul expressed so well in Philippians chapter 1 when he said, for me to depart and be with the Lord is far better. But for you, it's better for me to stay here. And so the whole idea is that we have a heavenly home. The blessings of coming together as God's family here are multiplied innumerably when we look at the heavenly home that God has prepared for us. The blessings then of coming home, what are they? Well, the Bible describes part of this as a great banquet. The Jewish people had this figure in their mind. And so Jesus describes the heavenly home, heavenly existence, as something that is jubilant and so joyful as a great banquet. And he described really the church, his own people, in that same way. So the question finally then comes to each of us: what am I doing to make the congregation a real, genuine family of God? When I was preaching in Pasadena, our Bible class was, it was kind of small. And somebody, I don't remember who, but somebody got the idea, why don't we get together and have a potluck just for our class over at a certain person's house, the Clores. And yeah, okay, let's do that. We went over there, and we had a hilarious time. We just had a great time. And somebody said, why don't we do this again next month? So yeah, that's a good idea. We got together, and some people brought some friends. And again, we just had a great time together. And I remember one time we were talking about, what are we going to do? Just eat? Well, let's do some fun things. And so somebody thought of the idea, why don't we go around the room and ask for the worst vacation, describe the worst vacation you have ever had. And it was so funny. And others in the congregation got wind of this, how much fun this class is having. And the first thing you know, there were people who were not in the class who were wanting to join in, and they got interested in the class too. But it grew because, why? Because the family atmosphere, the atmosphere of brother and sister sharing our lives together, that was a growth factor. And it was a stabilizing factor for the congregation. And that, I think it was, in that congregation, there had been some division that happened quite a while before I got there. And these things went together to heal some of that. And to alleviate the pressure and the stress of that sort of thing. We learn to love each other by living together with each other and sharing with each other the lives that we have. And so the blessings of coming home, those blessings are multiple. The Bible tells us a lot of things about home. It tells us a lot of things about the church being the family of God. As a matter of fact, it talks about the church as the family of God, the pillar and the ground of the truth and all of this. And so we need to think in terms of how can we make the church, the congregation, a genuine family of God. Now, maybe you can start the same thing that in your home that we did at Pasadena. I really wish that I could do that, but I don't think we're going to get very many people to drive 50 miles out to Camarillo to do that. But if you'd like to, I'll be glad to open my house and my condominium, and we can have one. And it'll be an enjoyable thing. But the idea, I want to leave that idea with you. The idea of the whole thing is that home and church need to have characteristics together of the fact that we love one another, that we are the family of God. We're going to sing an invitation song. If you are in any way subject to the invitation of the gospel, we invite you to respond. Let's stand together and sing, please.